This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Oteli Edwards.
And I'm Olivia Xiong.
Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Rescue efforts enter a critical stage in quake-hit Japan, with an intense heat wave adding to the challenge. Scores have died, while thousands face another night in shelters with dwindling supplies.
Chinese President Xi Jinping calls for a tougher anti-corruption drive in the military, while pushing ahead with efforts to modernize the People's Liberation Army.
Also, a record rally for AI-related stocks in South Korea sends the KOSPI soaring as traders race to pick up bargains after a series of strong earnings.
The Bank of Japan signals further rate hikes as it kept the policy rate steady, warning, though, for the first time of inflation exceeding its target.
Also tonight, why thousands of students in Asia, the bulk of them from China, are choosing Russia for their university education.
And how this Japanese DJ living with ALS refuses to be silenced by the disease, using technology to keep the beat alive.
Rescuers in Japan are continuing to search for survivors 3 days after a magnitude 7.1 earthquake struck the country's southwest. At least 35 people are dead.
Rescue and relief efforts have reached a critical stage, with the 72-hour golden window having passed this afternoon. Thousands remain displaced, and aftershocks have forced many to sleep in their cars.
Tens of thousands of homes remain without water or electricity, and authorities are also warning of heat stroke, with temperatures forecast to approach 40 degrees Celsius this weekend. Now, CNA senior correspondent Mitch Ishida, she joins us live now from Tokyo. Now, Mitch, tell us what is the latest now that the critical 72-hour rescue window has passed?
Well, Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kihara said the mall at which a massive explosion took place, Aeon Mall, was the only place left where search and rescue efforts continue. Now, after the magnitude 7.1 earthquake, all shoppers were evacuated. Some shopkeepers and tenants stayed behind and became victims of the explosion. Mr. Kihara said, according to police, 7 of the 11 rescued from the rubble died. Kumamoto Police Self-Defense Forces are making sure no one is left behind by going through rubble with rescue dogs. At Nippon Paper Industries factory, which was also badly damaged in the aftermath of the earthquake, Mr. Kihara confirmed 9 of the 11 rescued died, and he confirmed there was no one left behind. Now, search and rescue for all those who sought help were otherwise completed. So the government is now at the stage of turning resources to support evacuees. Mr. Kihara said 4,500 homes were without power, and according to Kyushu Electric Power Company, power should be restored this Friday. 79,000 homes had no water supply, and to provide water, the Water Association has sent 45 trucks. The Self-Defense Force is supplying water with its trucks. The Coast Guard docked its vessel at Kumamoto port with supplies. Separately, a total 240,000 bottled drinks are ready for distribution. Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi said the Self-Defense Force's Bathing Support Corps is ready to provide baths for evacuees, and daily essentials will be transported on Osprey aircrafts from the Maritime Self-Defense Force's escort ship, which docked in Kumamoto. It's very hot, and we're hearing evacuees want to take a bath. Now, the government continues to call for caution against heat stroke and stay away from weakened structures, as aftershocks can prompt them to collapse.
Well, Mitch, you mentioned that it's very hot, and we're talking about extreme heat here in Japan, including in these quake-hit areas. Could you help us tell us more about what's the impact on survivors and how this is affecting relief efforts?
Well, the temperature in Kumamoto is around 35 degrees, and the forecast on Sunday is 39 and 40 on Monday. And the Chief Cabinet Secretary said in a meeting, they called Kumamoto disaster a double disaster. And in the cabinet ministers' meeting, they pledged to step up support with air conditioners and backup power. And he stressed the importance of health and well-being of residents. Prime Minister Takaichi announced she wished to assemble a cabinet meeting to counter the heat wave the day before the Kumamoto earthquake. And it's in view of the record heat wave Japan has been experiencing, or over 40 degrees for 5 consecutive days from the 21st of July. Now, today in Kumamoto, evacuees have to deal with the heat, in many cases without air conditioning. Evacuation shelters include school gymnasiums. And according to the Education Ministry, on the average, 33% of schools in Japan have air conditioners and gymnasiums. And in Kumamoto, it's only 21%. Ms. Takaichi ordered the installation of air conditioners in all school gymnasiums as quickly as possible. So this counter heatwave measure is an urgent matter for Japan as a whole, not only for Kumamoto, experiencing a very hot summer.
Well, many thanks for that update on the earthquake in Japan. CNA senior correspondent Michio Ishida in Tokyo. In other news, Chinese President Xi Jinping is urging senior Communist Party leaders to toughen the fight against corruption, insisting, quote, the barrel of the gun must always obey the party's command. Well, according to state media Xinhua News, Mr. Xi is pressing ahead with plans to modernize China's military with greater use of unmanned technology and deeper integration of cyber and information systems. Well, he also said that the true test of military modernization is whether it improves combat effectiveness.
Well, the remarks come ahead of the 99th anniversary of the People's Liberation Army tomorrow. Analysts say the milestone highlights the looming centenary as Beijing pushes to build a world-class military. But a IISS report says that goal could be disrupted by sweeping military purges under President Xi's anti-graft drive. In May, former defense ministers Wei Fenghe and Li Shangfu received suspended death sentences after being convicted of corruption. They mark the toughest penalties handed to senior military officials since the campaign started in 2012. Turning to some business news now, it's been a volatile few weeks for tech stocks in South Korea, and today we're seeing shares rebound. Otelli, it's been quite the turnaround, hasn't it?
I know, and I think they're probably taking their cue from Wall Street overnight, because Microsoft and Amazon, they say that they're going to be spending more on AI.
That's certainly helping tech hardware stocks that we're seeing in Asia, also giving a boost to shares in Tokyo and Taipei. We want to bring in Roland Lim now. Roland, could you give us an update? Tell us how the day panned out.
Yep, we had a nice bounce from AI-related stocks. South Korea's KOSPI index soaring to a record 17.9%. That's with flash memory chip giant SK Hynix rocketing up almost a third, with the AI boom roaring back. Now, local investors taking comfort from SK Group chairman making his first direct personal investment in the chip maker to the tune of some $3 million worth of shares. Now, Samsung Electronics racing up as well, nearly 27% higher. The buying spree reflected in Tokyo, with the Nikkei 225 rallying 4%. Tech giant Advantest piling on 16%, while chipmaker Kioxia jumped more than 17%. Tech investment titan SoftBank rose nearly 14%. Similar story in Taipei, with the Taiwan weighted index rising nearly 8%, largely due to the 10% leap in one of the world's largest contract chipmaker, and that is TSMC. Coming up on East Asia tonight, South Korea planning a new sovereign wealth fund to invest in strategic industries over the long-term horizon. Plus, Taiwan continues to benefit as a hub for AI supply chain, with growth outpacing expectations for its second quarter. Welcome back. Time for your business news. No interest rate rise from the Bank of Japan today, but The central bank warning for the first time that underlying inflation could exceed its target. Analysts say it's a sign of rate hikes ahead in the wake of the government yen buying intervention. The benchmark rate held at 1% after it was increased to a 31-year high in June. The BOJ governor signaled factors that could push prices up as well as to create more exchange rate fluctuations.
中東情勢が金融為替市場や我が国の経済物価に及ぼす影響を特に注視する必要があります。このほか、グローバルな AI 関連需要の動向や今後の為替相場の変動が我が国の経済物価に及ぼす影響にも留意が必要です。
A check on the yen following the BOJ's decision. Now, it surged in the last hour, with analysts suggesting that the movement was due to official intervention in the market. For more analysis on the BOJ's decision, we're joined by Takushi Okubo, Managing Director from Japan Macro Advisors. Okubo-san, thank you for joining us on CNA. Now, the BOJ held rates steady today, but did warn that inflation was running hotter than expected. Does that put a move to 1.25% on the table at the next meeting?
Yes, I do believe so. So I am actually, after listening to Governor Ueda and after reading the July statement, I do believe that the BOJ is becoming more and more hawkish. So I am expecting the next hike to be in September, the mid-September meeting on September 17th, 18th, rather than October.
And the yen, that's still trading around 160 to the dollar despite intervention and Ueda's hawkish language. What will actually turn the currency around, do you think?
So obviously, there has been a long history of a carry trade, borrowing in yen, investing abroad. I think there has been a lot of capital outflow from Japan to overseas. So all these issues were basically leading Japanese yen to weaken over the last 10 years. But I do believe that these fundamentals are changing. Japanese interest rate is not zero anymore. When you look at the 30-year JGB, it's at 4%. It's the highest yield in more than 30 years. So I do expect that the fundamental to be more and more supportive for yen. So I think it's just a matter of time yen will hit the bottom.
So Governor Ueda also says that the exchange rate movements are now having a greater impact on inflation than in the past. So this weaker yen, has it effectively become a trigger for monetary policy, even though the BOJ says it doesn't target the currency?
Right. So I'd like your viewers to know that the Bank of Japan usually refrain from talking about exchange rates. So Bank of Japan usually very cautious in linking exchange rate movements to their policy rate. But then since December last year, I think Bank of Japan feels that it actually needs to warn the market that if yen weakens further, Bank of Japan will have to take that into consideration and raise policy rate to support the yen.
Where does the dollar yen go from here? I mean, we've had U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent also pushing the BOJ to hike. Has that apparent U.S. support actually created an effective ceiling for the dollar?
Right. So exchange rate or FX is one of the most notoriously random walking asset. You can actually do some forecasts for equity, bond. You have some idea where it goes, but empirically, academically study on the results, it's notoriously difficult to forecast exchange rate. Having said that, so I do think that the level of yen is excessively weak. So I am in agreement with Scott Bessent. But the problem is that what would trigger what would trigger the exchange rate to move closer to the fundamental? So I do believe that there could be a few potential trigger, but the Bank of Japan raising interest rates to kind of more normal level, prevailing level in the rest of developed economy, I think that's one of the triggers that would push yen to become firmer.
And throwing into the mix as well, Prime Minister Takaichi's fiscal expansionary plans and her growth agenda. Does that actually complicate things for the yen?
Yes, it does. So, for her fiscal expansion, basically, looser fiscal policy is also always negative for yen, and there has always been kind of a concern for Japan's fiscal health. So, I do actually feel this is more like a cry wolf story. So, people has been warning about coming fiscal crisis in Japan for a very, very long time. Actually, since I started as an economist back in mid 1990s. But it was actually the Euro countries, it was actually the UK who actually suffered the fiscal crisis. So, in short, I actually do not, I am actually less concerned about the fiscal issues for Japan than the rest of the, market economists.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but for the first time, the BOJ actually name-checked AI demand as an inflation driver. Now, pricier chips feeding into everyday goods. Is AI ultimately a growth engine for Japan or a new source of imported inflation, do you think?
So no, so as a manufacturer, so Japan has been, used to be a factory of the world, and Japan is still, one of the big manufacturing countries in the world. And we do have a number of companies that are benefiting from AI boom. So that itself is a positive for Japan. It's kind of a supporting factor for the growth. In terms of like upside risk, it's in the end, it's basically the oil kind of wave spiral. These are the factors that would worry Bank of Japan for the upside risk on inflation rather than AI.
Okubo-san, thank you very much for those insights. There was Takushi Okubo, Managing Director, Japan Macro Advisors, speaking to live from Tokyo. China's factory activity unexpectedly slid in July as leaders in the world's second largest economy struggled to reignite domestic demand. The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, fell to 49.2 in July from 50.3 in June. The reading, the weakest since February, ended a 4-month run above the 50 mark, which separates growth from contraction. The decline was driven by weaker domestic orders and typhoons that disrupted production. The boost from exporters rushing shipments ahead of the U.S. tariffs also began to fade. Manufacturers are also facing uncertainty from the Middle East conflict, which has pushed up energy prices and disrupted shipping. Weakness extended beyond manufacturing. The non-manufacturing PMI, covering services and construction, fell to 49. The composite PMI also slipped to 49.3, above the weakest readings in more than 3.5 years. The data underscore mounting headwinds for China's economy, with growth already slowing in the second quarter despite resilient external demand. GDP growth eased to 4.3 from 5% in the first quarter, and that's below the official full-year target of 4.5 to 5%. That is adding pressure on policymakers to roll out stronger stimulus to boost domestic demand and investments. Mainland investors are continuing to show strong demand for legitimate overseas investments, according to investment bank China International Capital Corp. That's despite Beijing's recent measures, which target firms that help mainland investors bypass capital controls. Authorities also imposed personal income taxes on offshore trusts. Hong Kong now has more than 130 mainland private equity firms allowed to act as asset managers in the city. Among them, they manage more than $1.5 billion in assets from domestic private funds. Despite the tighter regulatory environment, CICC remains optimistic about Hong Kong's role as a regional asset management hub. The firm expects double-digit annual growth in its asset management business. A Chinese robotics company, Unitree Technology, says new U.S. restrictions could limit its overseas growth as it prepares for a stock market debut in Shanghai next month. The company warned that its IPO filing, future robot models, could be blocked by the American market. And that's after the U.S. Federal Communications Commission added foreign-made advanced robots to its covered list. Now, that's a list for goods and services which carry national security risk and makes it harder to get approval to import into the U.S. Overseas markets account for more than 40% of its revenue, with the U.S. making up between 13 to 20%. Meanwhile, Apple has posted a record June quarter driven by strong iPhone demand and a surge in sales across China. The tech giant reported revenue of close to $110 billion for the 3 months ending June, and that's up more than 16% from a year ago. iPhone sales climbed nearly 22% to roughly $54 billion. Greater China led regional growth, with revenue rising more than 22%, even as the country's overall smartphone market shrank. Apple bucked the trend with 20% shipment growth, second only to Huawei. Sales in Japan rose 13.4%, and the rest of Asia-Pacific region saw a 15.6% jump. South Korea has plans to launch a new sovereign wealth fund next year with the goal of making long-term investments in cutting-edge and strategic industries. The finance ministry said the new fund will be launched with a budget of at least $14 billion. It will be established under the state-run Korea Investment Corporation, which already runs another fund. Proceeds will be used for reinvestment, government dividends, and transfers to the National Treasury. The government aims to have the relevant bill passed by the National Assembly this year. South Korea's proposed new wealth fund joins others in Asia, China Investment Corporation, Singapore's GIC, and more recently, Indonesia's Danantara. Taiwan continues to benefit from the AI boom, posting faster than expected economic growth in the second quarter. GDP grew a preliminary 13% in the April to June period from a year earlier, outpacing expectations of 10.8% growth. Now, Taiwan is a key hub in the global AI supply chain, home to the world's largest contract chipmaker, TSMC, which supplies companies including NVIDIA and Apple. Exports surged 40.3% from a year earlier to nearly $75 billion. But the AI boom has also driven up costs and left some workers behind, especially in services and traditional manufacturing. Analysts say the challenge now is turning AI success into stronger wages, investment, and opportunities for smaller businesses and the services sector. And you're up to date with the business news at this hour. Back to you.
Oh, thanks so very much for that, Roland. Right, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Japan's new centralized intelligence agency holds its first meeting amid concerns that Russia has reportedly turned the country into a, quote, den of spies.
And Kyiv accuses Moscow of using a North Korean missile in its latest overnight strikes on Ukraine. This is East Asia Tonight.
And here are the headlines we're following. Rescue efforts enter a critical stage in quick-hit Japan, with an intense heat wave adding to the challenge after the 72-hour golden window for finding survivors passes.
Chinese President Xi Jinping calls for a tougher anti-corruption drive in the military while pushing ahead with efforts to modernize the People's Liberation Army.
A record rally for AI-related stocks in South Korea sends the KOSPI soaring as traders race to pick up bargains after a series of strong earnings.
Japan has held the first meeting of its new National Intelligence Council, chaired by Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi. It was launched alongside the National Intelligence Bureau, the country's first centralized intelligence agency since World War II.
Now, the two bodies have different roles, and here's what we know so far. The National Intelligence Council, led by Prime Minister Takaichi, will oversee the government's intelligence strategy, while the National Intelligence Bureau handles operations, replacing the Cabinet Intelligence and Research Office, and it will bring together intelligence from the police, defense, and foreign affairs agencies, all under one roof.
The overhaul comes as Tokyo faces growing concerns over espionage and regional threats, with officials arguing that the country's existing intelligence system is no longer fit for purpose. A New York Times investigation published this month alleges that Russia exploited gaps in Japan's intelligence system to obtain Japanese-made components that were later used in missiles and drones in Ukraine.
Well, a lot to unpack here, so let's bring in the expert, Grant Newsham, Senior Research Fellow at the Japan Forum for Strategic Studies and also a retired U.S. Marine Corps Colonel. Well, thanks very much, Grant, for joining us this evening. So let's just start with Japan itself. The article suggesting that its challenge has more to do with structural weaknesses rather than political will. So you have plenty of experience working with Japan's security institutions, Grant. So how fair is that assessment?
Oh, I think it's not quite a sort of spy's paradise, but there hasn't been a systematic effort really in Japan to go after sort of the espionage which takes place. There's been a sense that, well, business is business, and isn't really what spies do. And then even within the government circles, that there's sometimes a low awareness of the risk that's posed. And partly this is because there is no centralized system that has prosecuted and tried to control espionage. The Japanese are aware of the problem, of course, but doing something about it. It's been a haphazard, ad hoc approach pretty much to date. And now this latest change is the start of really a centralized, coherent effort to go after spying in Japan, and not just against sort of government targets, a national defense, a missile defense, submarine-related technology, but also to try and go after this very serious industrial espionage problem that the Japanese have had for an awfully long time.
Grant, you mentioned that this is just the start, and we know that many other countries already have this centralized intelligence agency. So is Japan playing catch up here, or is this a signal of a more profound change that we are seeing?
Japan's really probably 70, 80 years behind where it should be. And it's understandable given the experience before World War II, when you had Japan's security services turned on the population. There was just a natural tendency to avoid that. Plus a sense that Japan wasn't at risk because the Americans were taking care of things. So Japan does collect intelligence, of course, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, Justice, the Justice Ministry, even the Economic Ministry. METI has its own collection capabilities, but they were all kind of doing their own thing. And the government didn't have really a central way of making their operations coordinated, ensuring that information flows exactly where it needs to go, and even compelling these services or these entities, which are not intelligence services in their own right, to actually cooperate. So there was no legal requirement. Now they're going to be required to cooperate, share intelligence, have it go to a certain place, a single place where it gets analyzed, and policymakers, the prime minister in particular, can then have a good look at sort of the intelligence that's coming in, because it does tend to go different places and doesn't get acted on the way it should in Japan. But so it's really something they dropped the ball on, but for understandable reasons. And now they're taking some commonsensical approaches to dealing with intelligence.
But one of the biggest challenges, I suppose, is the fact that it's dual-use technology, and obviously such technologies have, legit civilian users. So how can countries like Japan, stop them from being diverted for military use without actually disrupting trade? Is that possible?
Oh, it's just as possible in Japan as it is anywhere else. As any company, any country, the United States, South Korea, Singapore, the European nations, that they face a threat from people trying to steal their industrial technology. Sometimes it has a dual-use purpose, a military purpose, and that is a serious problem. But also, sometimes it's simply for commercial reasons, and all of these are targets. So it requires, an awareness on the part of businesses themselves, and Japanese companies do have a sense of sort of such risks, both commercial and dual use. The Toshiba case a long time ago is one example of the problems you can have. And this is understood, but really it takes a government to direct its counterintelligence resources to make it a very sort of difficult operating environment, say for the Russians, the Chinese, and other countries that would come to Japan and try to steal technology, either purely commercial for that advantage or the dual use. And those are the things that you were seeing, where Chinese or Japanese components are showing up in missiles that are being launched against Ukraine. Some of the missiles used by the Iranians will have Japanese parts in them. And that's where you'll have effectively spies coming into Japan, obtaining the technology under false pretenses and getting it where it needs to go via different channels, say to Japan's adversaries and other countries that are causing trouble around the world. And supposedly these exports are not allowed. So it's a gray area where this sort of thing goes on in every country, not just Japan.
Grant, you mentioned that this is a changing, security landscape. Could you tell us a bit more? What's driving the urgency for Japan to rethink really its intelligence capabilities?
Oh, I think there's a sense that the world's become more dangerous for Japan. And if you were around for the last 30, 40 years in Japan, you often seem that people didn't pay much attention, let's say, to security, particularly when it was outside of Japan. But also, I would have to give a lot of credit, actually, to Xi Jinping for having really sort of starting to threaten Japan in a way that nobody can ignore, and that has really got them very worried. The Chinese military buildup and the statement saying that, well, Japanese territory in the Ryukyus in southern Japan is really Chinese territory, that Chinese Navy sailing around the Air Force and the Russians, circumnavigating Japan as they've done recently. This has woken Japan up. And there's been a longstanding awareness on the part of Japanese officialdom and leadership that they do need to improve their intelligence capabilities, particularly when it comes to collecting foreign intelligence, because it puts them makes them blind, but also they're too dependent on, say, the Americans, on friendly nations to provide them with intelligence instead of being able to collect their own. So really it is the worsening security situation and the clear threats to Japan that have caused the Japanese government to finally do what's necessary to sort of put some coherence into their intelligence collection and analysis activities.
So any move in that direction is likely to be closely watched across the region. So Grant, what could this mean for Japan's relations with its neighbors, particularly China, where there's been some media commentary that has criticized the move as a sign of militarization?
Oh, well, this is to be expected. Particularly the Chinese will complain about it. They'll say this is a return to the 1930s. Really, it's nothing of the sort. If you want to see something that resembles the 1930s, look at China's own domestic and external intelligence activities. That's very similar to what the Japanese were doing back then. But in Japan's case, it's just common sense. And it really it's an outgrowth. It's part of Japan's overall effort in the last, say, 5 years to improve its defense, to bolster its defenses, to be able to operate better with the Americans and other friendly countries that Japan has in the region and beyond. So Japan has always been sort of a consumer of other countries' intelligence, and now it has the opportunity to actually make a contribution in its own right. And I would note that its intelligence gathering capabilities in certain areas, say space-based, but also maritime security, what goes on in the oceans around Japan, and in the air around Japan has been pretty good. They're not quite as helpless at counterintelligence as Japan likes to pretend. When they do focus on a target in Japan, say a foreign spy's operating, they can do a very good job surveilling it, but they have never done it with the seriousness and the organization that they need. But this is not a threat to anyone. If anything, it's Japan becoming more of a sort of a normal country when it comes to national defense and the normal sort of intelligence collection activities that a free country has to do to defend itself. But the criticisms from Beijing have, one, been predictable, but also it's probably an act of projection in many respects on the part of China and Chinese outlets.
I appreciate your insights. As always, thanks so very much for spending your Friday evening with us. Grant Newsham, Senior Research Fellow at the Japan Forum for Strategic Studies. Ukraine has accused Russia of using a North Korean missile in a deadly attack on a village, killing at least 5 members of the same family.
Радушному росіяни застосували вперше за довгий час ракету з Північної Кореї. Такі попередні дані, звісно, ще будуть експертизи, все буде перевірятися. Але станом на зараз це північно-корейська балістика.
Reports say the attack suggests Russia has obtained a fresh stock of North Korean missiles as it steps up long-range strikes against Ukraine. Moscow has reportedly been shifting to using more ballistic missiles, and its deployment of North Korean missiles fits the pattern.
Now, the strike comes as Russia launched dozens of missiles and hundreds of drones across Ukraine overnight, killing at least 9 people. This as Kyiv continues to grapple with a critical shortage of advanced air defense systems needed to intercept ballistic missiles.
As Western sanctions and the fallout from the Ukraine war continue to limit Russia's international engagement, the Kremlin is pursuing a quieter form of diplomacy with education. Russia has been expanding efforts to attract students from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, aiming for 500,000 international students by 2030. Dasha Chernyshova filed this report for CNA from Moscow.
When Angelica Malau was deciding where to study, she had 3 options: Indonesia, China, or Russia. The Indonesian student chose Russia, challenging herself to move thousands of kilometers to pursue a psychology degree at Rudian University in Moscow. She says the opportunity to live and study alongside students from around the world ultimately shaped her decision.
Russian degree, it's not just give me diploma, but it's give me a new experience, especially international experience. And then I know a lot of new cultures. And then I met a lot of people.
At Rudian, Asia has become the university's largest recruitment market. Some 45,000 of its students are from Asia, more than half from China alone. For many of them, Russia's political tensions with the West are less of a concern compared to its perceived advantages. The chance to get an international education in specialized fields in medicine, engineering and IT at an affordable price. For Thai student Noplop Hanich, a Russian education can further his career.
I wanted to experience new things, so that's why I decided to come to Russia. I learned something that I may not learn in Thailand. Knowing Russian language is important to work with Russian companies.
Nop says many Thai students, like himself, still know little about education opportunities in Russia, and it's something universities here are actively trying to change. Academic ties with Europe and North America have weakened since the start of the Ukraine conflict, and Russian universities are ramping up student recruitment in Asia, Africa, the Middle East and South America. The government has set ambitious targets. President Vladimir Putin wants the number of foreign students in Russia to reach 500,000 by 2030, up from roughly 400,000 today. Russia's push to attract more foreign students isn't just about education. It is an increasingly important extension of Russia's diplomacy.
The international students and internationalization of the education is also is a way to enhance the country's image. And of course, educating international students is an investment in long-term partnership-based relationship.
Experts say education has historically been one of Russia's most effective soft power tools, creating networks of graduates who go on to become business leaders, professionals and government officials in their home countries.
There is an interest in to bring some highly qualified specialists to our labor market, but of course the goal of building bridges, of developing cooperation is here too. Education, the cooperation with young people, with those who will define the future of those countries is vital for us. And of course, when people come to Russia, when they study here, when they discover Russian soul, when they discover our culture, what our country really is.
The Russian government offers around 30,000 state-funded scholarships each year to sweeten the deal for foreign students and has made it easy for them to enroll. But the market for international students is highly competitive, and Western sanctions as well as reduced academic partnerships with Western institutions since the start of the Ukraine conflict have cast doubt over the value of a Russian degree.
Whether Russia can meet its enrollment goals remains unclear, but the effort highlights how education has become part of the country's broader foreign policy strategy. For CNA, I'm Dasha Cherneshova in Moscow.
Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, renewed AI optimism clouded by another rogue agent episode, this time by Anthropic's Claude.
Plus, how a Japanese DJ living with ALS is using technology to keep the beat alive. Anthropic says its Claude AI models broke out of closed testing environments and were able to access the computer systems of 3 organizations. Now, the incident, which follows a similar hack by OpenAI models this month, is raising questions about the risks posed by increasingly capable AI. Ira Spitzer files this report for CNA.
Anthropic gave more details about this hacking incident in a blog post, saying that it found 3 situations where its models were able to reach the internet in what was supposed to be a closed testing environment, and then used that access to gain entry to the real systems of 3 organizations. The company didn't provide the names of those organizations, but said that they had been notified. Anthropic uncovered this after the recent disclosure from its Silicon Valley rival OpenAI about a similar incident prompted the maker of the Claude chatbot to go back and look at its own records, specifically incidents where the model might have achieved access to the open internet. These types of tests are basically to assess the model's capabilities by giving it open-ended assignments in an environment believed to be safe, but it's apparently hard to predict exactly what the model is going to figure out in order to try and achieve its goals. The latest incident, along with the OpenAI hack, is sure to feed into what's become a contentious debate about how worried we should be about AI and what type of regulation may be necessary to prevent incidents like this. OpenAI and Anthropic have both come out in favor of greater oversight of the most powerful models, saying that advanced AI could place sophisticated cyber capabilities in the hands of criminals or hostile governments. They've called for things like common requirements, including safety evaluations, incident reporting, and stronger security protections. But advocates of open source models, some of the most advanced of which are coming from China, like DeepSeek and Moonshot AI's Kimi, are concerned that regulations could favor large closed model companies such as OpenAI and Anthropic, while making it harder for smaller developers to compete and innovate. Either way, it appears that we're just at the early stages of reckoning with models that have the ability to carry out complicated tasks, and it's unclear where exactly that might lead. Ira Spitzer for CNA in San Francisco.
A Japanese artist living with ALS is redefining what it means to perform. ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a rare and fatal disorder that affects the brain and nerves controlling muscle movement. For Masatane Muto, his journey with ALS is showing how technology can help people move beyond the disability.
In a rehearsal room in Tokyo, Masatane Muto is preparing for the stage. A specially designed jacket is fitted around him. Attached to it are robotic arms. They're not just part of a costume. They're what allows him to perform. Mr. Muto is a Japanese artist and DJ, better known as IV DJ Masa. He lives with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. The disease damages the nerve cells that carry signals from the brain and spinal cord to the muscles. It gradually affects movement, speech, swallowing, and breathing.
音楽もファッションも僕にとってはアイデンティティなので、障害者という枠を超えてボーダレスに世界とつながれる大切なコミュニケーション方法なんです。
Mr. Muto was diagnosed at the age of 27. Over the years, ALS gradually took away his ability to speak and move, but it never took away his creativity. His work with performance technology began after an encounter with roboticist Ori Yoshifuji. Using Ori Hime-I, a communication device for people with advanced ALS, Mr. Muto can type, operate a computer, and create digital artwork. An AI-synthesized version of his own voice converts the words he types out loud. He even designed the artwork for his stage jacket. The jacket was designed around Mr. Muto's performance. It supports the robotic equipment he relies on while allowing him to move comfortably on stage. Every detail was shaped with his input using eye-tracking technology. For this artist, it brings together the different parts of his identity. The technology also allows him to control music and visuals. Electrodes attached to his scalp detect brainwave activity. An AI-driven brain-computer interface translates selected signals into commands. Those commands control the robotic arms attached to him. Since his diagnosis, Mr. Muto has also worked with researchers exploring how technology can improve the quality of life for people living with ALS. But for him, the biggest change has been personal.
ALS になって誰しもが有限な時間の中で生きていることを痛いほど突きつけられたような気がしたんです。そこから今日まで一瞬一瞬の時間を無駄にしないように今の僕に生み出せるものやアイデアを形にし続けてきました。
His ambitions now stretch beyond Japan. After using the system in Tokyo, Mr. Muto traveled to Bangkok for his first overseas performance. It has fulfilled one of his long-held dreams. Now he has another destination in mind, Los Angeles, the city where he was born.
海外のイベントやフェスで僕らのライブを披露したいですね。特に僕が生まれたアメリカのロサンゼルスで披露したいです。もちろん妻と娘も一緒に連れて行きたいです。
ALS has changed almost every part of Masa Tanemuto's life, but it has not defined the limits of what he can achieve. With the help of technology, he continues to create, to perform, and to show that disability does not have to be the end of expression. Instead, it can be the beginning of finding new ways to be heard.
And on that note, we wrap up Friday's edition of East Asia Tonight.
Don't forget headlines anytime at CNA.Asia and CNA 938 Radio.
And you can also find us on all our socials, including Facebook, YouTube, and X. Thanks for watching, and see you again next week.